made it work. I have access. I can keep it in my pocket.
I don't know if that pauses it or whatever, but I kept playing. I thought maybe it had something to do with the timer. So
Yeah.
I played that
Perfect.
didn't work, and I was like, I tried the screen one,
Yeah, that didn't work.
and I think maybe the screen is what turns it off.
Oh, well, let's not do that. Okay.
I think those speaker meetings,
Yeah,
those making sure it's
just
HDMI.
Yep.
Well, it can be VJ too.
I like HDMI.
Or you can use theirs.
Or it gets stuck. In.
Yeah. Yeah, we can. Phone is off.
That's a good idea, actually. I'm pretty sure I did. You never know.
I don't want you to be the person with their phone going off.
Don't want the telemarketer calling you in the middle of it.
Hello? Hold on.
Don't want Elmer
I'm in the
bugging.
middle of something.
Don't want Elmer bugging me either. It's off.
Are you gonna?
Winery.
Except for the problem will be we'll be like done it in a half hour. Anybody else want to talk?
We can flip the show. Yeah. Yes,
Because if you talk fast, I'll talk fast, and
I know.
we'll be done in no time.
We'll just hit
Click,
blah, blah,
click,
blah.
click, click, click.
Yeah, no.
Are we done?
Don't give any seizure. His eyes go so fast.
It's one of those things that's like nervous about. I haven't presented in so long. Yeah.
That's a busted. I guess we're gonna get started. I just want
We'll give. You won't be the first to heckle.
All right, the clock says it's 1, so we're gonna get started. Your schedule says something different than what this is. This is actually the behind the screens thing, but we changed it up a little bit. So, because we had somebody bail on us.
Elmer.
No. So, you are?
I am Harold Bieber. I'm the Director of Information Technology for Atlanta's John Marshall Law School, which is 4 miles from this building, and Savannah Law School, which is 4 hours from this building.
I'm the systems engineer for CALI, Dan Nagy. I only live 30 minutes from here, but CALI is in Chicago, Atlanta, and Minnesota. We had a vote of who was Bob and who was Doug. I'm waving behind you because I can see the slide, and I don't think it matters. I'm pretty sure Harold is.
As long as we have beer.
Yeah,
we're
the beer
good.
is the important beer.
Beer is the important part.
So the scope of this talk, there almost is no scope. We're just gonna kind of ramble for a little bit. There's a bunch of topics we're gonna be talking about. Nuts and bolts, outsourced service, weird and wonderful information architecture that we're both kind of doing. We'll do some distance learning, talk about load balancing, talk about some back-end stuff, and then some in-house commo stuff. For those of you wondering what happened to this discussion and why it's not what it is billed, it's because Elmer backed out. That's obviously not Elmer.
No.
So you thought this was gonna be something else. It's not. But what this is that even if you don't run your own shop, some of the stuff that we're gonna be discussing, I mean, a lot of you guys are doing stuff with like central IT, campus. A lot of you guys have moved off. You don't even have your own shop anymore. Even if the stuff, you think the stuff isn't relevant to you, just understanding the language and the nomenclature, what's going on, may help you decipher some of it. So, I mean, some of the stuff, you know, we're dealing with people that using words like GitHub and Node.js, and I don't know, choose a random complex
Anything and everything.
technological term, you know, or HAproxy. It may help you understand what they're talking about, so you're not staring at them blankly. So we're going to have big, scary IT words, and if you already get it, that's fine. If you don't get it, you know, we're not going to make it any harder than it has to be to get the point across. We're trying to keep it so that it's relevant to everybody. I did that.
We'll take care of it for you, John.
Dropped on your head as a child. So, big, scary IT words. The first big, scary word we're going to use, and it's not even that big and scary, is something called a load balancer. So, we both use it. We use it in different ways. And who got the yellow book? Everybody got the little yellow 100 things that'll kill you book? In that book, one of the things that was really cool about it is they have something called the bottom line up front, or bluff. So this is like the bluffs line, the bottom line up front. So a load balancer is basically, if you think about it as a construct, it can be a server, it can be an ephemeral on-demand instance, like a cloud-based thing. And all it does is it takes network load and distributes it to wherever you want it to go to kind of get that load spread out some. It can be agnostic about traffic. Typically, when we talk about load balancers, we talk about Apache or web load balancers. If it's agnostic about traffic, you can get it to do almost anything. He and I use it for somewhat different reasons. We use it at CALI largely for capacity. During exams and stuff at CALI, our load spikes quite a bit, right? Everybody's running lessons. So we'll go from like 2 nodes under the load balancer to many nodes under the load balancer. Use it for...
Yeah, for us, obviously, we're a standalone law school, so we don't have a central IT handling any of our web stuff. We're doing it ourselves. Ian, my web designer's right there. He can tell you it's basically we have a server for Atlanta and a server for Savannah. The reason that we're using it is not really to load and balance our traffic. It's more for the redundancy of it. HAproxy will determine that one of the nodes is down and kick it out so that you can fix it, and everything will just go to the other node. The other thing that we like about it is that we can actually stop bad traffic at the load balancer. I don't have to worry about my network admin yelling at me that I've screwed up the firewall because I put in a bad IP, blockage somewhere. I can block you at the web and not affect anything else on our network. So to me, the load balancer for me is really not for the incoming traffic. It's to manage what my nodes are doing and then who's actually hitting my nodes. So that's pretty much the way I use it.
And we use a piece of canned software called HAproxy, or we just call it HAproxy. You can go get it. It's out there. It's open source. It is extremely efficient. I didn't put this anywhere in the slide, but I don't know about yours. Mine doesn't breathe hard.
No.
It's just doing proxy instances. And I have it on something that does other stuff. I have an instance that does other stuff. It really is a really low overhead machine or a solution. Okay, this is. Go ahead.
Question in the sense of infrastructure, is this
It's both. It's both. I'm on premise. I'm true hardware. He's cloud.
Yeah. So, we got a slide about that later.
Yes, we
That's
do.
a good one. Okay, so this is a slide to indicate that the next slide is a really geeky slide.
Okay.
Okay, because
This is-
this is obligatory, right?
Right.
You have to have one.
Yes, and then this is our setup at John Marshall, okay? So basically, everything comes into my load balancer. Node 1 and Node 2 are two identical servers. They were built, I built my own servers. They're identical to each other in hardware, space, everything. I sync between the two of them all day long, and then where this says random infrastructure, for me, that's actually my database server. So we run WordPress, but WordPress runs on the nodes. WordPress's database lives on a database server. So both nodes are going to the same database server. And then we are in the process of putting together a slave backup database server just to keep, yes, Tim?
When you say sync all day, like,
Every 5 minutes, or we can force it to sync if something happens. So most of the time when Ian is trying to do any changes, he's doing it normally on node 1, and then it'll sync over to node 2.
And to point something out, the nodes don't have to be in geographical proximity to each other. Now, the HAproxy is smart enough with the algorithms that it has to actually figure out that one has a little bit more net latency than the other, and it will adjust the algorithm by which it assigns hits. So he could actually spin up a node over in Savannah. I'm in the cloud, I'm on the East Coast Amazon cloud. I could spin up an instance in the West Coast Amazon cloud and point the load balancer at 3 nodes, and therefore spread my traffic out across the country. I could spread it out across the world if we wanted to.
Yeah.
So where you could have a friend host a box for you, and you could stick a node in, pick somebody else's law school and stick a node in.
Right. Also, my nodes are running, we're doing Apache virtual hosting, so all 3 of my websites are all on the same, they're basically all the same server each time.
Yeah, so the way that works, so the Apache virtual host, if you're not familiar with Apache, you can have multiple websites on one Apache server, okay? And then depending on what URL comes in, what hostname comes in, it will go to a different document route for either of those 2 websites. This thing is agnostic, the load balancer is agnostic, so all that back end of which site gets what is handled by the individual nodes. So you would have 3 or 4 different virtual hosts if you have different websites that you're hosting off of one set of architecture. It's not that difficult to set up. It's like setting up any, as a matter of fact, if you go to Ubuntu these days, all the Ubuntu stuff already comes virtual hosted. You're just using the virtual host that it has. It's super easy to add others. Previously, it was a little more sketchy. This is virtually the CALI setup too, except we don't actually rsync between the nodes. What we do is something a little more complex because we have traffic issues. Or we can have traffic spikes sometimes. So what we're doing is, we get the Happy CALI patron. He comes into, he comes through the load balancer to a web node, basically. So the web node, the load balancer is sitting between the Happy CALI person and the web node. What we're doing is we actually have an NFS map. So our content management system is Drupal. Drupal has something called the files directory. Okay, the files directory in Drupal means that we have people that can upload pictures, parts of lessons, whatever. If you're on one node and you put a picture on that node, it will only ever appear on that node. So if the load balancer takes somebody else to a different node, there will be a placeholder for that picture and it'll look like the picture is broken. So what we're doing is every time a file is written to the file space in Drupal, it writes it out to another server. It writes it out to another instance in the cloud. That doesn't sit within, it's not one of the nodes, it's just an NFS server and it also has a web server. That also then stays, or the Apache can see that, so that when the request comes in, Apache checks to see if that file is there. If that file is there, the Apache gives a rewrite to the web server that's also on the NFS server, and then that picture or a piece of JavaScript or a cascading style sheet will come from that Lighty server. You would think that would add a bunch of latency to the model. It doesn't actually. Under heavy load, the ability to serve the JavaScript, the ability to serve the images coming off of that Lighty server, and Lighty is extraordinarily fast, actually winds up speeding stuff up quite a bit. It does add complexity to the model. And I will tell you that we get sideways of it every now and again because we don't tinker with it enough, because it just works. I mean, I don't recall the last time NSF broke, I broke it. And I did it more or less out of stupidity. But I mean, it never really has gone sideways on us. All that traffic, except for the Happy CALI person traffic, happens on our internal Amazon network, right? So that's not something that's going to the big outside world. And the same thing with the Drupal, with the database. So we're using Drupal, the backend database. There's a master and a slave. That we're hitting one of the two with one of the nodes, and that's also sitting out in the Amazon cloud. We have several redundancies in the database built in, so that if we wind up screwing it up, we can always get it back. Or if it winds up getting screwed up, we can always get it back. So it adds complexity. When I first saw it, because I inherited this architecture, and when I first saw it, I'm like, what are you doing NFS for? And we may be looking at something a little more robust. NFS does do things like open up port map reports. We just had to issue a port map report. We didn't realize it was open to the world. It was acting as an amplifier for an attack. So I had to wall it off. So there's stuff that's a little more secure, and because it is so mission critical, because that NFS mount is so mission critical, we're gonna have to figure out how to harden it in some way. We haven't had a problem with it, but I don't want to. Okay, so this is HAproxy specific information only. It doesn't really apply to any other load balancers. There are other ones out there. What is it? The Linux Virtual Server. It's something I used that was what Cornell's Iron one was when I built it for them. Ours is HAproxy specific. Proxy is only TCP and HTTP. It doesn't do UDP. It won't forward UDP traffic at all. So it's not really, you can't make a level 4 switch. It's not that agnostic. But any TCP traffic, it's agnostic about. Any HTTP, it's agnostic about. You want to talk about SSL?
It can be a pain initially. It's definitely necessary, but where we had an issue with it was initially HAproxy didn't want to pass that information, or it would pass you as a non-secure traffic to WordPress, which is looking for, an HTTPS traffic. So sometimes you would get things that would work, sometimes you wouldn't. What we ended up doing was moving the SSL certs to the nodes, and then we just basically tell HAproxy to send all HTTPS traffic straight through to the nodes and let the nodes handle it. The other issue was when Ian's on inside the network connecting to WordPress, if he's not doing it through HTTPS, he can't log in. It doesn't want him to log in because he's trying to do admin work without an HTTPS connection. So having that inside the network really helped us out, fixing it that way.
Yeah. The earlier versions of HAproxy is what tripped us both up, and the other versions of HAproxy, even though they stated they would handle SSL traffic, wouldn't. What they would have to do is they would decrypt it and then send it along in the clear to the nodes, and the nodes would respond back. HAproxy would re-SSL it and then send it along back to the patron. That you could watch actually the load balancer doing that when you flipped on SSL, and that's the only time I've ever seen load out of HAproxy was when we did that. The last incarnation, which gave me fits because you had it and I didn't,
Yes.
and so his SSL was going through and my SSL was not. And I'm like, why is it any different? And then so it was a versioning issue. So the newer versions of HAproxy are SSL end to end. It will get and receive and pass through SSL traffic. It's just a configuration switch you flip in the file. I said it can be a level 4 switch. Let me translate that to you. It means that it's forwarding traffic on a much more basal level than looking at than just being a proxy for HTTP. It'll take almost any traffic, any TCP and any web traffic. Like I said, it won't do UDP, but you could theoretically pass through anything. And FTP is a bad example because it needs a control channel, but you can almost pass through any other traffic through that. And as long as there's a port on the other end listening, you can pass it. And as we pointed out, it's fault tolerant. So like Harold said, I mean, it'll kick it out if you get a node that goes bad. HAproxy monitors the backend nodes to see if they're still doing what they should be doing. So if you have it in HTTP mode and a node drops off, HAproxy will kick it out. And you might get a couple of patrons that notice that they've dropped off for a second, but as long as we're writing all the cookie sessions and stuff to a centralized NFS mount, as soon as the other node picks them up, he just kind of sort of picks up where he left off. Maybe a little hiccup, the button didn't press right, a white screen, but then it comes right back. So, in previous incarnations, I also used to use it to take iron and put it up on the racks, so to speak. So if I was pulling maintenance on a node, I would kick it out of the cluster, do the work I need to do on it, test it before I put it back in, take the other one out, and do the same thing. No downtime.
Now, before we move on, Tom, you're also using HAproxy at Rutgers. How are you using it? Come on, Tom.
So, I use it to load balance my LDAP. Actually, our HA or HAproxy, which by the way, the official name is HA. Right way.
Okay.
One or the other. But we'll say
Tomato,
HAproxy.
tomato.
I use it to load balance several different things. There are some caveats with it, which is that if you pass traffic through it, certain protocols.
And with Apache, you have a slide.
It is problematic, but so it have like whitelist or what have you. It worked very well with it. It won't actually violates the
Right.
SMTP specification, but most ours virtualized and we're getting ready. So the SSL pass-through is nice, but then affect all that traffic.
We use it because we had a security issue. I'll get to that in a second. But one of the reasons, because we're in the Amazon cloud, and as a caveat, the load balancer that you get, because Amazon has a load balancer service. So if you fire up a load balancer within Amazon, what you're getting is a proxy. What you can't do within an Amazon is do any tinkering with it. It's a black box to you. There's a GUI interface that you add and subtract nodes from, and you can't get in, you can't shell into it, you have no control over it. The nice thing is if it ever dies, gets stressed out, they'll just replace it for you. They'll hot swap it for you. But we switched from that, and we'll get to that in a second. This is just a quick graphic and that's really maybe. But it also gives you a nice little GUI interface. So it's just basically a web page. And so you don't have to be a technical whiz to take stuff in and out of the load balancer. You also have to be a technical whiz to actually figure out if you got something kicked out. And I kicked out one of our web nodes deliberately so that I would have some different colors other than green and blues in there. So I kicked out one of the web nodes, put it in maintenance mode, so that one is not serving things through into the back end, or it's not serving traffic at all. And the proxy is not sending traffic to it. We're talking about security. I tried to think of a concept to does everybody know what a NAT is, or natted firewall? The internal IP addresses versus the external IP addresses. If you try to go into a natted environment, technically what's in front of that, creating the NAT, won't let you do it. You can get out, and it keeps state. So you go out, and then because you're communicating with something, it lets it back in. This kind of lets stuff back in, and then it translates stuff, or can translate all that traffic into your internal network. So it's almost like a two-way NAT of a way. It'll let traffic into and then translate it to go to the right spot. You can wall off the back-end nodes, so that if you had, like Tom was saying, if you get traffic that you don't like, you can actually stop it at the load balancer. And then you can add whatever security packages you want to the load balancer to do that. So in our case, what we're doing is, since we have a bunch of nodes in the back, and you can have as many nodes as you want, well, each one of those nodes actually should, and comes out of the box, writing its individual log files on its own instance. We've taken and consolidated all those log files and then shot them across the network. And currently there's some place where the load balancer can see them. So the load balancer can see the logs, and then you can stick a piece of software, say fail2ban, on your load balancer, so that if it sees aberrant traffic, it can actually create a rule and shut down that aberrant traffic. And the reason that's important is because what Tom's saying about seeing about some traffic not playing nice and not seeing the external IP address, Apache is kind of one of those. I mean, Apache sees the internal IP address, but the actual backend node doesn't. All the node sees is the IP address from the load balancer. So any bad traffic that comes through to a node looks like it's coming from the load balancer. And the only way you can determine if it's not is to stick something on the load balancer that inspects that traffic, like Snort, or look at the logs from whatever is getting hit, in this case Apache. So what we're,
That's not true. So let me rephrase that. As I said before, certain applications can be. Actually has that option. You have to, in
Right.
HAproxy, you have to configure it to use, I don't remember off the top of my
it's
head.
HTTP mode, so you can't do level 4. You have to call it's called HTTP mode. So you can set it to HTTP mode and then it'll pass it through. No?
No,
That's what I remember working. What?
not anymore.
Okay.
It'll pass that, and what you have to do is on your Apache login, you have to reconfigure your Apache logs to pull from where it sticks.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. You're talking about the source. It's the not the source IP, the whatever the hell it's called.
I can look at
Yeah.
it, but it can, but
Yeah, we.
there are, the moral of the story is there's a very limited number of applications
Yeah.
that and receiving end of the box.
Right. Right. And you can make Apache do that. That's what we've done. So we're grabbing the IP address from there, looking at it with fail to ban, and then building rules based on what we saw. And we did it for a very specific reason. Here's another geeky slide coming up. At CALI, that's what we were seeing a lot. Now that makes no sense to a lot of people. That's a combined log format. That's one line from an Apache log. And I apologize, such a mess, but that's the way it looked. This accounted at some point for roughly 25% of CALI's traffic. The 403 is highlighted. That's the code that's transmitted back from Apache back up the wire. And that's what we're seeing. The 41836 next to it, that's actually a size, and that size stayed specific to all the traffic that we were seeing. It was almost always coming from an Apple device, and in that case, you can kind of tell that it was coming from actually an OS X device, not a iOS device, so not a phone. If you looked at this if you're looking at it with like netstat on the node. Which is just looking at the traffic, you would see all of this traffic coming from the load balancer. So using the tools that are like the command line tools on the node, it looked like it was all coming from the load balancer, but we knew it was coming from other places, right? Because it was coming in through the load balancer. This is when we still had the load balancer run by Amazon. We could actually do packet grabs of this stuff using like packet sniffing software. And once we got high enough up, we built our own load balancer. We could do packet sniffing on this and see what was actually going on what they were actually trying to do. And if you try to hit that endpoint like that, the lessons.php, nothing happens. It just fails. I mean, whatever it was trying to do was not succeeding. And we thought we had a problem that an old CALI CD had gotten out and somebody had ripped the old CALI CD, because CALI used to send out old CALI CDs, and figured out where to go or trying something malicious. And so what we did is we built our own load balancer. We wired the Apache logs back to it so we could see the IP address, and then we built out a fail to ban to actually ban any traffic that looked like this. And what we soon discovered was a lot of law schools have only a few forward-facing IP addresses. So, and some of this traffic was coming from law schools. So if we ban that IP address, we basically shut the law school off from being able to CALI lessons. Figured that out pretty quick. Got 2-3 phone calls to figure it out. So we shut it off, and we just built that. We shut it off, and then we started looking at what it was, and it turned out that after bringing in the programmer who had written some of the lesson stuff, Sam, it was actually a problem in the code. It is kind of an issue because the thing about Macs is nobody ever shuts off their Mac, right? If Macs don't need to be rebooted 4 times a day like a Windows machine does. So somebody will have a tab open in a Mac and walk away from it, and that's pretty much what you're seeing, is that the software lost state. And it was just babbling to it. And it wasn't handling it well. So that's the story of why we built our own load balancer, is because this traffic was killing us, and we wanted to be able to stop it somewhere. The way Amazon's firewall worked is we could allow all the traffic in or not, but we couldn't disallow it based on just an IP address, and there's almost no way to interactively or automatically work with there's almost no way to interactively work with the Amazon security groups. There we go, okay. This is real quick, we talk about this stuff all the time, it's the cloud versus
Not
iron.
versus,
Cloud
cloud or,
Cloud
or iron.
And this got flogged to death in the late whatevers, 08, 09. But we don't want to beat it to death too much. Harold's on iron, Cali's out in the cloud. I used to have an old boss that just says, use what you got. What he had was iron. Cali, at some point, had all their servers in, like, Chicago, Kent. I'm the assistant engineer, I don't live in Chicago, Kent. Elmer didn't live in Chicago. So we moved it out to the cloud. One of the things the cloud does get you, and it's different, because different people, different organizations prefer different things. At least with Cali, we have a relatively standard bill every month. So we don't have to go back to the well around mean failure of a piece of equipment and ask for $8,000, $16,000 for another chunk of hardware. Amazon will do that for us. When we add more stuff, and you do get creep, because it's really easy to spin up an instance and cost your organization money. So we're pretty diligent about keeping the instance count down and the size of the instance count down. It can creep up, but that's one of the things that it did get us was a relatively consistent billing cycle. And it also kind of fuels in, I call it lowers the bar to innovation too, because you can build one-off instances, take a little hit on your budget to try and see something will work, and then evaporate it if it didn't work. So you're not buying a piece of iron just to try something. But you guys,
Iron,
you guys.
sometimes it's easier to get through budget to just say I'm buying a piece of hardware versus we're gonna keep paying for this cloud thing for the next few years. It's a budgetary thing. You just have to get, whatever they wanna sign budget-wise, that's what we'll take.
And I think Amazon finally started taking or billing you. For the longest time, it was credit cards only. And, when I was at Cornell, the credit card I had didn't go up that high. So we had to go through Central Campus, get a $10,000 limit credit card, and, So, yeah, this is the joke slide. Who wants to talk about student printing and email? Anybody? Yeah, nobody wants to talk about it. But there are vendors down here, and that's, this was supposedly a joke slide, but really, in your organization, if there's stuff that's cheap enough to outsource it. Go buy a solution. Why, you don't need to spend gajillions of man hours unless you want to tinker something together to do it. Sometimes you can build a better mousetrap. Sometimes you build the same mousetrap and it costs you how many FTEs, so. Another scary word, Slack, okay? Slack is so now we're segueing into a different part. This is a piece of software that we both use pretty regularly. Elmer talked about it. We have a Slack channel where we have a Slack a team for CALI. It's collaborative software. It's free or pay.
We're free.
Yeah,
We use the free version. CALI uses the pay version.
The only difference is the amount of integrations you could have. We get unlimited. You get 5.
We get 5. The free version gets 5 integrations and 10,000 messages stored for search. Free version gets unlimited integrations and unlimited text for search.
Yeah, so you can wire things like bots into it. You can wire automation into it. It now has a pretty nice editor, so you can use it as a document repository if you really wanted to. And now it has voice built in, so you can actually, I don't think we've used Skype in forever. We're just now using Slack all the time doing voice stuff. And it's very reminiscent. Anybody old enough to remember IRC? I know there's people old enough to remember IRC.
We know that side knows IRC.
But yeah,
Hey. Or bulletin boards.
no, Skype is pretty much voice and video. Yeah, it's just voice, and nobody wants to see John. So we do that, or Elmer for that matter, or me. But it's very reminiscent. If anybody is old school enough to remember IRC, if you look at the interface, it looks almost. They ripped it off, and it's like IRC on steroids. Okay, here's the thing Dan doesn't like to do. This is the slide. This is the part where Dan has to do a live demo. I don't push the exact right button, and I'm trying to see. Oh, okay. And then we minimize that, and hope it'll come back when we want it. And then we pull up Slack, and I got on the wrong screen. Of course, why not? down, it goes over here. So this is CALI Slack. I mean, this is just, you know, I told you we peek behind the screens. This is what it looks like. And this is the way most of us spend our time communicating with each other almost every day. We don't use, we're different, right? You use collaboration, use project management software, right?
Correct. We use Asana as one of our integrations.
We don't have project management software. So we have everything we know is contained in our brains. And that's why this thing was kind of a lifesaver for us. So we have a bunch of different projects. We have the A to J project, all this stuff. That is what suffices for us as kind of project management, right? So if you, maybe I shouldn't do this because sometimes, well, this is okay. So the A to J Patobi guys, Patobi is the contractor we have. This is the way we communicate with our contractors, primarily. Any hired gun that we have, that's what we're doing. You can see, you know, if you're familiar with the CALI ecosystem of services, you notice A to J, you notice Elang Dell, all that stuff in there. We actually have it. What else do we have here that I can show you real quick? Oh yeah, well, I'll show you StatusBot. There's StatusBot. This is an example of an integration within Slack. What we've actually done is a bot, which is something you can actually talk to. And then into this bot, and I'm not going to do it live because I don't feel like typing, and I'll get it wrong anyway. I screwed up. But I just did it a minute ago. And what this is, if you can ask it in real time, and you see what I asked it earlier. I just wanted to see the amount of page views that the CALI site had racked up in the past 30 days according to Google Analytics. And since it's wired into this, so nobody needs to log into Google Analytics. If John needs a quick snapshot of what's going on with the site, so he can talk to the board or talk to the contractor, or talk to something, he can just ask it in plain English what's going on, and you can ask it a variety of things: page views, total hits, country of origin. There's all kinds of stuff. You can anything that Google Analytics kind of measures, the Slack bot will know, and you can actually ask it, or the status bot will know, and you can actually ask it. So that's an example of both a bot and an integration. So it's automatically talking to you. If you type something, it'll type back, even if it tells you I don't know what you're saying. So, and then the other thing we've got is, where's my trouble channel? It's gonna be grim because So this is the trouble channel. We use a piece of monitoring software called Nagios. In order to get, so the whole team at CALI may not necessarily want to know when Elmer's got something up on blocks or whatever. So what this does is it takes all the Nagios alerts that normally would just either get shot to somebody's email or pop up on their phone and sticks them into a channel. Now, I still look at my phone. It still goes to my phone. It still goes to my email. But for some of the other folks at CALI, this is the way they see when they pop a Nagios, when we pop a Nagios alert. So they can tune into it, tune out of it, sometimes get a little chatty. And then it's not only that, but I can get in there, or anybody can get in there and annotate it, so I can acknowledge that I've seen the problem so that they know I've seen it. So, you want to talk about anything here? Or do you want to look at
Yeah, I think it's all pretty much.
Yeah, we can look at, that's the other thing we're going to talk about, is teams.
Yeah.
So even, how many teams can you have free? Do you know?
I think you can join multiple teams.
Multiple teams, yeah. So
There's no
Slack
limit.
works off of teams, and so there's 2 C's open. This is the CALI team, right? Where am I at? This is
That's the bottom one, I think, is the CaliCon.
That's the CaliCon team. So in Slack, you can make multiple teams as well. So just because you made one team doesn't mean that you're locked into that. The T is the Technoids team. I don't know, everyone was talking about the Technoids mailing list. He's trying to get it moved over to Slack. So you can make different teams. And it's just where you want to draw the line. Typically, you would have one team per organization and just organize using the channels and stuff. But you can actually make other teams. I mean, I made a team for my son's ROTC, Naval Junior ROTC unit, and we use it for a combo there. So. Okay. Anything else? No, we did. No.
Construction.
Is that construction or is that?
I think that's what that is.
I thought it was,
Yeah,
oh
it
yeah,
is.
that's construction. Somebody saw it. Oh, it's my mouse. Where's my mouse?
There it is.
There it is. There we go. Okay, now we got to make it full screen again. How do we do that? Oh man. There we go. Okay, so we made it to the live demo. I hate doing live demo. System monitoring, we talked about Nagios a minute ago. There's a lot of solutions available to it. This is one of those things that's relevant to you, even if you don't run your own architecture, even if you don't run your own infrastructure, because just because you don't run it doesn't mean you don't want to be aware of what's going on with it. So even if you have the main campus host your website, you can run something like this on your phone, on your laptop, on whatever. You can pay an outside service to look at it. You can get an outside service to look at it for free, because when the whatever lawschool.edu website goes down, they're not going to call main campus. They're going to call you and let you know that your website is down. It would be kind of nice to know that your website was down first. So even if you're just monitoring to see if your website is up or down, it's not a bad idea to run a piece of monitoring software. CALI's using Nagios.
Yeah, we're using What's Up Gold, and primarily Hayward will watch the network traffic on it, and then Hal monitors all the hard drives on any of our servers. You know, he gets an alert in the morning letting him know if, you know, if one of the machines is low on disk space. A lot of times it's one of our backup servers. It's, you know, or the NAS if it's running low on space, and we know that we have to move data. So that's pretty much how we use it. We just monitor the network and our standard servers.
Yeah. And you get portable alerts. You can wire it. You can wire this stuff up into your phone. The other thing that let me show you. I got one more slide here for the. That's what our Nagios looks like. I know it's not that impressive. It's just a dashboard, really. The way Nagios works is you can also write your own tests and stick them on the individual sites, and it's really just shell script, and it's an exit code for shell script as to what level alert. That doesn't mean anything to you. It's just the way shell script finishes. But because it's a shell script that runs, if it does get an alert, you can actually write a little bit of self-healing code in there to try and fix it. So if it's on a web node, and I know this, and I know the Apache has problems with memory leaks, and it pops a load alert, not only will I let it just pop the alert, but I may have it hub Apache as well. You know.
I know, they're
that
like, oh,
and,
yeah,
that
yeah.
and the rain.
Right in the middle.
That's all right.
And the rain, too.
Oh, okay, even more scarier words, and this one is CyberLocker, okay? So, so you think things like Dropbox, Google Drive, Microsoft, what is it?
OneDrive.
OneDrive, I don't even know. It's just a place where you can both stash data and share it with the big outside world. Okay, this is the bottom line up front slide. We're both using something called Owncloud.
Yep.
Yeah, you're using
Mine is a server inside our network room is our own cloud server. Right now, it's primarily the IT department that uses it, 25 gig or however much I want to allocate. And if I need more space, I just stick another drive in the server and we continue. I can have my OneDrive on my phone, so I have 25 gig on my phone everywhere I go. You know, they tell them to stop. I guess basically everything that's on the slide is pretty much standard stuff. You know, it's cheap, as you just pay for your storage. The encryption is good with it. You know, I don't know if you can plug it into.
You can plug the encryption in. The encryption is great. One of the things the encryption screws up is what's underneath that on the slide, which is the Solar. The Solar is the advanced search, so you could get a little bit better search out of Owncloud if you wire Solar into it. If you're using it as a true document repository, if you install encryption, it kind of screws up the Solar. So it's kind of an either-or thing. You can have really good indexing and search, or you can have a decent encryption. The encryption, you can get a master key to it, so that if the whenever your users it locks himself out, you can get to it. It's also kind of important to do that just because of the backups. I mean, you want to be able to recover data, and you kind of need the master key to recover the backups in that case. They recently, in their newest iteration of Owncloud, or maybe second newest iteration of Owncloud, you can actually wire headless LibreOffice into it, and you can use it like Google Docs. So you can have it inside. For us, we're not doing that. I know you can do it. It seemed we're going to try it. It just seemed like a little more trouble than it was worth, I think, because it was still kind of beta-y. But what the heck? The other thing doing something like this gets you on your own is, a lot of people are concerned with like privacy and sticking stuff out on the cloud, even if it's up on like Google Docs and stuff. This, or even on Dropbox, this gets kept in. This is yours to control, however you like. It can either sit out in the cloud or it can sit in a server room. But if you're worried about sensitive data and stuff, you can utterly and absolutely control who sees what on your own stuff, and not have to worry about it going I don't believe that it is. I don't think it's. Forking, fork is when they take the code and they make new code. There may be a HIPAA compliant fork of it, but I know the one we're using is not. I would be surprised if somebody didn't try to bend it to HIPAA. But again, you can keep all that stuff inside. It winds up being yours. And it's a good alternative to Dropbox. We at CALI have, because we used to stash our stuff everywhere as an organization, and finally we've alighted on Owncloud, just put it in Owncloud. It kind of makes automatic backups if you share the stuff with people, because then it will get shared down to their desktop as well. So if you blow up yours, not only is it still sitting up on Owncloud, but it's sitting on somebody else's laptop as well. That's a blessing and a curse if you're gonna, like CALI, I said, used to have the CDs they would send out. Well, there's still historically all those ISOs stored somewhere that you used to be able to burn CDs from. And if you accidentally share the ISOs, you fill up everybody's hard drive space really quick. And you get phone calls. Okay, distance learning, slide, I don't know why the slide's still, the picture's still there. But.
Yeah, we're going to touch on a few things real briefly before we end this. Distance education, distance learning, however you want to call it. We're doing it at John Marshall now because with our Savannah location. Okay, where we have an issue is we have part-time students. Our Savannah population is about 134 students. So nighttime students, there's maybe 35 or 40 of them at the most. So to get a class that is not a required class, an elective for them, you may have 3 students who need that class. Well, you don't want to pay an adjunct to come in to teach 3 students. It's just not enough. Now what we can do is we can teach it out of Atlanta to Savannah. They're sitting in a classroom in Savannah. I'm actually going to show you Savannah's classroom here in a second. So it saves us money on additional professors, and it gives those students aren't waiting around an extra semester to catch a class that they missed. We can also teach from Savannah to Atlanta. So Savannah has a few people on their, few faculty members that have a different, expertise than some of ours in Atlanta. So they're going to teach, I believe they're going to teach a maritime law class sometime in the fall or spring. That can be taught to the students in Atlanta because we don't have a professor who's ever done that kind of stuff. So I'm going to show you this classroom. We're running the Polycom Real Presence system, the Group 900 or Group 700. And it's all H.264 compliant. We do not have bridging set up on ours right now. We just, we didn't pay for the bridging part of it. We're just direct connect to Savannah. But we can always, turn on bridging. It doesn't take anything for us to create our bridge. That would give us upwards, it actually can flex. With Polycom, we can start out, the default is 25 users. You can expand it up to 500 users for a week, reduce it back down to 25 so you're not spending money all the time for it.
There you go.
Okay, and we'll talk about this view here in a second because this is actually from Google. Okay, so as you can see, our classroom, the front of the classroom has 2 80-inch displays. You can see the camera that sits between them. So basically what happens is the professor from Atlanta shows up on this monitor, and then his content, whatever he's showing in Atlanta, shows up on that TV. Here's the Polycom system right here. Obviously, this is one of our old podiums. We're having new podiums put into these 2 classrooms. The Atlanta classroom looks almost identical to this. Ours is actually a little bit deeper than that. We have, I know, thanks, though. We actually have 60 seats in our classroom. Savannah only has about 25. We'll have 25 in theirs. But obviously their numbers are lower than ours, so they're not going to hit that 25 mark anytime soon. If I rotate around back here, show you the back of the classroom. Okay, so as the professor's standing there, the back, if he's teaching only to his local class, all 3 TVs will show his content, so he can actually see his content like we are here. And the guys are really annoying outside. You can't really see it, but there's a camera right above this TV. So the back camera points to the professor. The front camera is what we consider the student camera. So we've actually used this when we did a healthcare presentation, as we changed our healthcare in June. Instead of having to send our rep down to Savannah, we just had all their staff in this room. We turned both cameras to face students, so our employees and their employees were sitting in the same room talking with whoever the HR rep was from that company.
And you are a for-profit law school,
Yes,
so
we are
you're going
for-profit.
to use it for maybe in the future.
For newer. Yes, Tom? Sure.
How's logistics handled?
You can see them and everything.
So now between Rutgers and Camden, are you guys doing any distance learning?
Yeah, just a little room.
Yeah.
It's a little budget thing.
What we call a holodeck,
Yeah.
and expect maybe
Okay.
Yeah. And in comparison, our room is about $88,000 for both rooms combined. And that's all the installation and setup and all that stuff. Now, obviously, we're not doing any recording. If you saw Tom's last year, right, is when you showed yours. Both rooms look identical to each other, so it looks like you're teaching one big room. Our rooms are, totally separate from each other. They look totally different. Let's see. And obviously, this was all posed for Google to take pictures. Let's see, let's go back.
Oh, yeah, that's me. CALI does other stuff too, besides the lessons we were talking about distance learning. So CALI does other stuff too. One of the other projects that CALI has is the Access to Justice project, or AJ project. It uses some tech that doesn't really exist too much in other places in the CALI ecosystem. GitHub is not one of it. GitHub is shared. We put all of our code up on GitHub. GitHub is it's a piece of revision control software. So as we're writing in-house code, we can check it in. It's actually can do revision control on anything, but we use it to do revision control on code. That's what it was designed to do. We have a series of code repositories that we stick up. One of them is A to J. It can do things like constant integration, if you've heard this little term before. So it will, as you make changes, it will make you push the changes down to the development server so you're running the latest live code. And what we use it for a lot, especially with the A to J project, is it has a bug tracker built in. So we can submit issues, and then the programmers can go back in there and fix them. For the A to J project, we actually had the AJ, we envision it being deployable by people other than us. That's the reason it's being written, at least the authoring software. So there's a deployment script that you can actually pull off of GitHub, anybody can, and then as long as you've been blessed with the password to get to the A2J repository, it'll go get that and build that for you to simplify building Node.js, because Node.js is kind of newer software that they just got bought. Samsung just bought them yesterday, I think, Node.js. So you probably see a lot of Samsung devices come with Node on it. That's just what we stare at most of the day. Okay, here you go.
And this takes us back to Savannah for a second. Okay, well, the way we got that image set up for our distance learning classroom, Google actually is now doing this Google Business View. So they contacted us and said, hey, we're doing a bunch of stuff in Savannah. We would like to come in and take inside pictures of the law school. Is it okay? So they came in and set up. They set up in that distance learning classroom, took the 360-degree image. They also did part of our library. So here is the inside of part of our library. Now, Savannah is an interesting building because it is the old Candler Hospital, which it was a Civil War hospital. Okay, so when everything was being converted, and when we first purchased the building, you could actually stand in the first floor and look straight through the ceiling on the fourth floor. So there was a lot of flooring missing. As they were building the library, these columns here were actually, there was like a plywood wrapping around them. They thought they were just wooden columns. They were going to tear them down, and then they realized these are actually historic columns. So, and this majority of this floor is actually original. There are pieces that had to be fit in, obviously, but most of it is original. But it was actually pretty cool to have Google come in, and if it will, you can move through the second. This is the second floor of the library.
No, I mean, I didn't even know. Maybe I was paying attention that Google was starting to do this kind of stuff, nor were they coming and asking,
Yeah, so now what we're in the process of doing is talking with them and getting individual files of this to use for marketing. Because, I mean, you know, if you want to know what it looks like inside Savannah's law school, there it is. I mean, they had done some, they also did, this is outside of our building. If it'll come up. Yeah. Okay. So this is actually the front of what was the old Candler Hospital. The other thing that's interesting about Savannah is we actually have the oldest tree in Georgia in our front parking lot. So that was, you know, if you know your Civil War history, Sherman stopped burning there and gave the whole city to Lincoln. So the Candler oak, which is in our front parking lot, we had a nightmare doing stuff with it. We had to make sure that it was going to be protected, that, you know, not too many cars would be able to park near it. We still have historic tours that come through to show the tree. So Savannah's always an interesting spot to go to.
But we put that in there just because the wandering through the law school virtually was actually pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, and like I said, Google contacted us, said we're doing stuff in your area, and from what I understand, our marketing department, as we've talked about this, the new marketing department that many schools have, they have contacted Google and asked if they're going to do anything in Atlanta so that they can, you know, do our building in Atlanta also.
Pop back.
Yeah,
Pop back
now
on
I
the
gotta
slide
go
to
up
get
to
to
the-
the next one, they'll make it big. I think we're
Yeah.
done. Yeah, we're done.
Yeah, we were part of the ghost tour in Savannah also for many, many years because, like I said, it was a Civil War hospital. So some interesting stories about that building when we first purchased it. There were bones found that were determined to be cow bones. It didn't stop building, so we were happy with that.
I guess that's it for the slide deck, so that we're done talking. If you guys
So-
got questions, you guys were asking questions as we went along, so we can go get snacks.
And then come back for Chris's talk about everything technology.
Yeah,
I was just curious.
yeah,
You decided, like, so you actually pay for an instance
yes,
just for your load balance?
yes. Because when you buy from Amazon, it's a black box. So you can't really control it other than taking nodes in, putting nodes out via GUI interface, their interface. You have no other control over that box whatsoever. And because we were getting what we thought was malicious traffic, we built our own load balancer because the firewall that Amazon gives you, you can't stop individual IPs from coming in. You can either let an entire, well, you can, but you have to do it in a giant group. Right, and then only for one port. So you can't have like an IP here, an IP there, so you block it in a range for a port. And there's no way to do it. There's absolutely no way to do it non-interactively. A human has to do it. You can't wire something into it to make it not do that. So we pay for a load balancer. It doesn't have to breathe real heavy. We've tested to do other things like be the failed advanced server. We're going to start dumping all the logs there, so we have to maintain a separate logging server.
It's like an off-topic question, but with the
If they find,
wayfinding, like,
do not know. Like I said, they called us. We're like, that's not really an IT thing. We'll give you the marketing person's number. Anybody?
That's
Go eat
not
lunch.
Yeah.
Go eat snacks.
That's go away. That's the go away slide. Okay. Thanks, guys.
Thanks. It's difficult.
It is a pain in the ass. That's all right. Okay.
Now you have to unextend.
It doesn't matter. I run all my stuff extended anyway. I run all my. What are they actually doing?
I don't know, there's a whole bunch of toilets in the parking deck where we're doing this, and you're like looking at it, you're like, toilets in the parking deck? And right next to it is a parking deck. Everyone wants to see, there's like 6 or 7 toilets? 3 toilets?
Yeah, that's all right.
You got more than one. The best would be like to have someone pull up next to your car and you just sit there on the toilet.
If we could bring Tom on, it probably would slow us down.
That's, yeah, exactly.
We were wrecking.
Yeah, no, that's
Pretty bad, so
guys. Oh, I didn't bring my bag. Oh, I brought this my
Well, I'm making this snack on purpose, because I've snacked every other time that there's been food. It doesn't matter, I don't care what
Build
filter.
your own little, trail mix.
And selection for power they put on these fancy podiums.
It's send, I looked it up, it's send your proxy.
Blah, 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 blah.
Nice fancy podium with a.
Yeah?
What?
Send your proxy.
The other room doesn't have a power supply up there. I think they
It's
added
even
them.
worse.
I think they added the power supplies after.
Nobody had plugs.
Yeah, because I was plugged back there, and I was worried John or I was gonna trip over the.
So they didn't even think to put a wire.
Yeah, where you can actually like go and see like,
Yep.
yeah, where different things were in the library.
It's hilarious. I mean, it's just an oversight.
Yeah, I think if you are interested, they make.
And that one, I love it, so that, I do have to go for, and then I have to add. Send proxy.
There's something you can use to integrate SketchUp, but I don't know how that is. But I know, I've seen like a presentation before. I think one of them they also have this up in the library. I'm not sure it was them, and then it was about, but I'm not sure which school it was.
Went to CALI, okay, all right, I'll read the lesson.
But I know it's been done.
One of the stories that ever heard. As you destroy the entire, I mean.
Well, librarians, but they're so harmless.
Probably said,
No,
please
I'm
wait
a
5 minutes.
member of the public who I'm not.
He's at the law school researching how to sue you. So that he can sue you. You don't see the irony in this, John?
Here. They help me.
Still fun.
Everybody, from what library? Any library?
Oh, newer. I know the guy.
Like, he wants the interlibrary like for what?
Oh, he won't even say, so you could probably go to his local public library. Do exactly what he wants.
Yeah, the mic is turned on.
I just turned it down a notch. I don't turn on my.
Where it goes.
have them start like flying in the air